To the black people who are saying that when Carmelo Anthony killed Austin Metcalf, Austin got what he deserved, what are we doing?
Rosa Parks days is over. You cannot think that you can move somebody out of a seat that you don't own and think that it's going to be okay. And you can't determine how I'm going to retaliate on you when you put your hands on me in an aggressive manner. Austin Metcalf got exactly what he deserved.
But white people, obviously not all of you, so let me just get that out the way, but a bunch of y'all are just a bunch of racist, bigoted crisis actors.
People really believe that that kid had the right to tell Carmelo to move. If that kid would have just minded his own business, would he or would he not still?
Nothing matters but this. He was at a school event at the wrong team's tent with a knife. He clearly chose murder than to walk away, cut and dry here. Nope, wrong. Imagine you are invited to a party at someone else's house and you are legally carrying a firearm. And then a fight breaks out and you, or like an altercation breaks out between you and some guy and, you know, there's drinking involved or whatever. And some guy starts saying stuff like, yo, man, get out of here. And you're like, I can do what I want. I was invited to the party. Verbal altercation escalates. And then the dude, you're standing there and you pull your sweater back and you've got a gun. And you put your hand up and say, don't come close to me, bro. I'm warning you right now. Do not come close. Do not take another step. Then the guy grabs your arm and makes a move. So you draw your weapon and you use it. Okay. Make the argument. You have no right to defend yourself when you're being attacked by a guy. Make the argument. By all means, go ahead and do so.
All right, guys, welcome to my channel. I think you can guess what I wanted to talk a little bit more about today, because I know that this is something I have covered a couple of times in the last week, but this is a situation that is still stirring up a lot of debate online, and I think it is sparking a lot of very important conversations. There are a lot of very unhelpful narratives going on about what played out between these two kids. So today I want to go over the police reports, witness accounts, what these self-defense laws in Texas are, because to me, it is very clear that if you are claiming that this is self-defense, that you don't know what that means, and you have not taken a minute to look up what justifies the use of deadly force. Because believe it or not every self-defense scenario justifies murdering somebody. And I'm really grateful that that is not a precedent that has been set in society. And I'm really grateful for the countless reasonable people that do not want that to be set as a precedent. But before I get into all of the things I want to talk about, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel, because YouTube is heavily shadow banning my channel right now. I would appreciate your help in supporting the growth of my channel and letting YouTube know that censoring conservative content is stupid. Anyway, let's get into this. So first, a lot of the comments that I have seen in response to my videos, in response to other people's videos, is that we do need to wait for more information to come out to know what really happened. And that is something that I am in favor of. And I wish people would apply that logic, especially when the media comes out with a narrative on a particular situation, Jussie Smollett being one of the most famous ones, waiting to see what actually happened, waiting to see, if we get witness accounts, if we get video evidence, if we get police reports, anything like that, before making it about race, before making it about any particular narrative, making a judgment based on the facts on what the consequences should be, because that's something that we just don't do. So it's really interesting to me that people are suddenly very in favor of it in this particular scenario. But what is unique about this situation is the fact that we have dozens and dozens of witnesses saying what happened, and all of their stories line up. And that is not always the case. A lot of times we don't have a lot of witness testimony. We have to wait for body cam footage. We have to wait for security camera footage. We have to wait and see if anybody saw what happened. So a lot of times it's like, we don't know. And interestingly enough, the media is always quick to spin the narrative and tell us what to think before we know what happened. But in this scenario, that's not the case. We have like 100 kids that were around these two boys that saw what happened, heard the words that were exchanged, saw who pushed who first, who said what first. And the fact that Carmelo Anthony produced a weapon before this escalated to the point of even needing one. And that is the defense that he is obviously going to have to make in court. So this was according to one of the many, many witnesses that are all saying the same thing. It says that Anthony was from Centennial High School and was sitting under the Memorial High School tent. Austin had told Anthony that he needed to move out from under their team's tent, and Anthony grabbed his bag, opened it and reached inside, and proceeded to tell Austin, touch me and see what happens. No one really thought Anthony really had any weapons in his bag, and Austin proceeded to touch Anthony, and then Anthony told Austin to punch him and see what happens. A short time later, Austin grabbed Anthony to tell him to move, and Anthony pulled out what blank recalled as a black knife and stabbed Austin once in the chest and then ran away. Austin began grabbing his chest and telling everyone to get help. Blank advised he did not know Anthony's name but stated another Memorial Track member, Blank, was friends with Anthony and he could identify Anthony. Blank described Anthony as a black male, skinny, with possibly a goatee, short puffy hair, and wearing Centennial High School clothing. This concluded my contact with Blank. All of the blanks are kids that are clearly minors, and so their information is being protected. On another page of this police report, these are all of the names that they took down of people that witnessed the events. There are almost 30 of them just in this list. Another witness account says this: the officer asked him what happened, and he stated that they were all sitting on the bleachers under Memorial High School tent when another male who he did not know walked over and sat under the tent. Blank then said Austin, the victim, told this male that since he did not go to Memorial High, he had to leave the tent. Austin and the male went back and forth, and then Austin stood up and pushed the male to get him out of the tent. Blank had said during this time of arguing, the male was reaching around in the bag he had. It was at this time the male took out a knife and stabbed Austin and then left the scene. While the second report doesn't outline specific words that were exchanged, I think a consistency between the two is that Carmelo Anthony was reaching around in his bag while they were arguing. The police report then outlines the interactions with Carmelo Anthony after he was apprehended. This says, I gave the suspect instructions to keep his hands up in the air. During this time, the suspect said verbally out loud, I was protecting myself. It should be noted that I had not questioned him about the incident when he made that comment. I asked him if he had any weapons. He said no. I patted him down for weapons while we were walking along the fence, and I did not locate any on his person. Another thing that Carmelo Anthony, or identified as a suspect in this report, said, he put his hands on me. It also says, while the suspect sat on the ground, I advised that I had the alleged suspect. The suspect then responds and said, I'm not alleged, I did it. It should also be noted that the suspect asked me, is he going to be okay, while he was in the back seat of the patrol vehicle. Another officer provided this report. He says, when I arrived on the scene, I approached the track and field area and saw Officer Cortez kneeling next to a black male wearing a gray hooded sweatshirt and blue sweatpants. The male, later identified as Carmelo Anthony, was in handcuffs and was seated on the sidewalk. While walking to the patrol vehicle, Anthony made another spontaneous statement and asked if what happened could be considered self-defense. I replied by telling Anthony I did not know what happened. It should be noted the in-car camera in my patrol vehicle was activated prior to Anthony being placed in the patrol vehicle. Based on all accounts, the level to which Carmelo Anthony escalated his response to was not proportionate to the threat that he was facing. Did Austin Metcalf have the right to tell him to leave? I don't know. I mean, in my opinion, as I have said before, Carmelo Anthony went under the tent of a high school that he did not attend. Many people have said when you are at a track meet and you have different areas, they are assigned specifically to different schools. I understand that these tents were put up because it was raining, but there was a tent for Centennial High School. So there was no reason for Carmelo Anthony to go under this tent. And know that when my kids go to school or they are taken to an event that is still, part of the school activity, but not necessarily on campus, that they are instructed to stay with their classmates, stay with their teachers, stay with their coaches, whatever it is, so that the teachers and the coaches can keep an eye on the students that they are responsible for. So all of that makes sense to me. But what this turned into, in my opinion, and what seemed to be the opinion of a lot of very reasonable people, is a tough guy situation where we have a couple of high school boys getting into it and, kind of trying to assert their dominance as testosterone-filled teenage boys tend to do, and kind of getting in each other's faces. And that's something that is normal. What is not normal is to be a teenage boy that thinks you have the right to carry a weapon onto the premises of a school event, whether it's on campus or elsewhere, and to use it in immediate response to another teenage boy getting in your face. I don't think any of us want the precedent to be set that if our boys get into an altercation with another kid, that deadly force is immediately acceptable. Because as I've mentioned before, I have two boys. I have a daughter as well, but she's a little younger, and physical altercations don't seem to be a thing for little girls to do. They have much more drama. They don't do the physical thing. But I have two boys, and they have dealt with bullies before. And I've told them, you don't have the right to put your hands on somebody, but you have the right to defend yourself. And self-defense is something that I am in favor of. I want them to be able to protect themselves, but I would never, ever, ever, ever tell them that escalating it to the point where you come close to, even remotely come close to ending somebody's life is acceptable. And if we are going to accept that as a general rule across the board, we're going to have a lot of dead high school students. But if I'm going to go with the logic and the conversations that we have had surrounding other violent high school incidents, I'm believing that a lot of us want to see violence in schools decrease. But if we're going to talk about what the actual laws are, let's look at that. It says in Texas, self-defense laws are primarily outlined in Chapter 9 of the Texas Penal Code, covering the use of force, deadly force, and protections like the Castle Doctrine and Stand Your Ground principles. Below is a concise overview based on the legal framework. Number 1, self-defense. General self-defense. It says a person is justified in using force against another person when they reasonably believe it is immediately necessary to protect themselves or others from the other person's use or attempted use of unlawful force. So you can defend yourself. If someone pushes you, you can push them back. If someone touches you, you can touch them back. Of course, that might lead to consequences or a meeting with teachers. Started it, what escalated it, there's going to be a lot of conversations. But of course, you have the right to defend yourself. Nobody is arguing against self-defense. But let's go on, because there are limits to what you can and cannot do in every single situation. It says the force used must be proportionate to the threat. For example, you can't use excessive force like a weapon against a minor threat like a verbal insult or someone just touching you or grabbing you. You still don't have the right to escalate it immediately to deadly force. And as multiple witness accounts have said, this interaction between Austin Metcalf and Carmelo Anthony was like 30 seconds. The limitations: self-defense does not apply if 1, you provoked the attack unless you clearly abandoned the encounter. 2, you were engaged in criminal activity other than minor traffic violations. 3, the force is in response to verbal provocation alone. 4, you're resisting a lawful arrest unless excessive force is used by the officer. So let's talk about who provoked the attack in this situation. Carmelo Anthony intentionally went into an area that he was not supposed to be in. Now, does that mean that anybody is justified in putting their hands on this kid? No, I am not saying that at all, even though I know I'm going to get comments saying, well, you're justifying that Austin Metcalf put his hands on Carmelo Anthony. I'm not saying that at all. But he went into an area he knew he wasn't supposed to be in. Therefore, he knew somebody was going to approach him about it. It might have been another student. It might have been a coach. It may have been a teacher. Somebody was going to say something, and he knew that. Now, Austin Metcalf went up to him, asked him to leave, said, you're not supposed to be here. That's when the verbal altercation escalated, as it would. High school boys are not great at backing down and putting their pride aside and just walking away from a situation. What was not justified, what escalated the situation where self-defense doesn't work, is where Carmelo Anthony put his hand in his bag where he knew he had a weapon that Austin Metcalf was not aware that he had. Carmelo Anthony told him, touch me and see what happens. Carmelo Anthony knew exactly how he was going to respond before Austin Metcalf did anything. He knew that he had a weapon in there. He put his hands on that weapon. He was looking for that weapon, and he was provoking Austin Metcalf to do something so that he could justify using it. In one of the reports, it says, touch me, see what happens. And then he said, punch me and see what happens. So it's almost like he had the thought process, thinking to himself, touching me might not hold up if after this whole interaction of me using my knife, where I say that using it was self-defense. So I need him to do something more. I need him to go a little bit further. So he told him, punch me. Austin Metcalf did not punch him. He grabbed him or shoved him. People are saying two different things, but that still doesn't justify the use of deadly force, because Carmelo Anthony is going to have to say that he reasonably felt that his life was in danger. The use of deadly force basically means it's either their life or my life. I believe that this person will kill me if I don't kill them first. In the law, it says deadly force is justified only when, 1, you're justified in using regular force under 9.31, and 2, you reasonably believe deadly force is immediately necessary to protect you against the other person's use or attempted use of unlawful deadly force, or to prevent imminent commission of serious crimes like murder, aggravated kidnapping, sexual assault, robbery, or aggravated robbery. Where a lot of people are saying, well, why didn't Austin Metcalf just leave or retreat instead of, touching or grabbing him? Well, why didn't Carmelo Anthony leave? Why wasn't he the one to leave the scenario? He's the one that stayed and said, touch me, punch me. He's the one that provoked and egged this person on, which is something that he is going to have to answer for in court. If you reasonably felt that your life was in danger, why did you stay there and tell this person to punch you? That's not something that somebody is in fear for their life would do. Then there's whether or not he was allowed to have the knife on them. Based on Texas law, it says under Texas Penal Code 46.03A1, it is illegal to intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly possess a firearm, location-restricted knife, club, or prohibited weapon. 1, on the premises of a school, public or private, primary, secondary, or post-secondary. 2, on any grounds or building where a school-sponsored activity is conducted. 3, in a school transportation vehicle. It also says schools have zero tolerance policies in many districts, meaning even a small knife, for example, a 2-inch pocket knife, can lead to a suspension, expulsion, or police involvement, depending on the circumstances. School handbooks often ban all knives outright, regardless of state law, allowances for smaller blades, and courts typically uphold these rules for students. And Carmelo Anthony should have been very familiar with these consequences already. It says CBS News Texas has learned from law enforcement sources involved in the investigation that 17-year-old Carmelo Anthony, the suspect in the murder of 17-year-old Austin Metcalf, had previously been suspended for bringing a knife to school. Law enforcement sources tell us that 17-year-old Carmelo Anthony should have been in class at Centennial High School and was skipping school yesterday when he allegedly stabbed Austin Metcalf following an altercation. We have not received a response from Frisco ISD to that information. So we have all of the information. And of course, Carmelo Anthony deserves his day in court. He deserves to speak on his own behalf, to have legal representation, and the chips are going to fall where they may. We're going to find out exactly what happened. But as I said, we have a lot of witnesses all corroborating the same thing. So some of my final thoughts on this thing, even though I know that as this case develops, I probably will have more commentary on it. But for now, first of all, this is a tragedy for both families. Absolutely. We can agree that the families of both the perpetrators and the victims have to carry the weight of these situations on their shoulders for the rest of their lives. That is a sentence that both families have to bear. Based on all of the information that we have available, this was not just a simple case of self-defense. Did Carmelo Anthony have the right to touch or shove Austin back in response to Austin touching and shoving him? Absolutely. Both kids probably would have gotten in a little bit of trouble for getting into a physical altercation, but the level of force that Carmelo Anthony used in that situation was not justified. Even if you carry a weapon like a firearm for the use of self-defense, if you end up using it in a deadly way, you are going to end up in court and you are going to have to justify to a judge why you felt that your life was in danger, why you felt that it was either their life or your life. Because if you use it and you end up in court and the judge says there are a number of other ways that you could have gotten out of this situation, you could end up going to jail for murder. Just because you have a weapon does not mean that every single situation where you feel that you are threatened justifies the use of that weapon. As for the other spins that have been put on this story, especially regarding race, that is especially unhelpful, because we're taking the individual actions away from it and saying that certain people, because they're Black, have the right to do things, and white people essentially just have to take it. And when I mentioned in my other video, I have white sons, one of them that is going into high school next year, and I have a lot of concerns about this because there are a lot of people that are being raised to believe that because somebody is white, you have the right to treat them however you want to, or escalate a situation beyond what would be reasonable. What does that say about the danger that my boys could be in just for being white? If that is the way that you look at justice versus injustice, then you are an evil person. And I appreciated what this gal had to say about the overall tone of these other narratives surrounding the situation.
We have such a sickness in this country that involves not just crime, but the lies that follow. Because I know everyone now knows about the white kid that was stabbed in the heart by the Black kid at the high school track meet. I don't think the altercation between the two had anything to do with race. I think the response on social media, though, has everything to do with race, because it actually baffles me that people donated to a teenager for killing another teenager and then running with all these different narratives that it was self-defense. The white kid was a bully. The Black kid was a victim of white supremacy. Have y'all lost your collective minds? Because I know damn well that if the roles were reversed, you'd be singing a different tune. You have a kid that brought a knife to a high school track meet, allegedly placed himself inside a tent he wasn't supposed to be in, instigated a physical interaction by challenging someone to touch him while he was grabbing a weapon, and then stabbed the kid that took him up on that challenge, and then had the audacity to ask if it could be considered self-defense. If you have to ask, The odds are not in your favor.
So no, this was not a Rosa Parks moment. This was not a civil rights moment. This was an altercation between two kids that is now being twisted into a narrative where Black people can do whatever they want to white people. And I'm hoping that most sane people don't want that to be the world that we live in. Anyway, again, I would love to hear all of your thoughts on this in the comments below. Please, again, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Keep it real, guys, and I will see you in the next one.